Hey there, this is Matt with State of Flux here with another one of my Studio Ghibli reviews, this time talking about Whisper of the Heart, the first full feature-length theatrical release not directed by Hayao Miyazaki or Isao Takahata, this time directed by Yoshifumi Kondo. Now, I want to talk about him towards the end of this, but first I want to spend a little bit of time about this completely beautiful, delightful film. This is one that I first watched right when I graduated high school. Around the time Howl's Moving Castle came out, this got its US release via Disney, if memory serves. And I was kind of blown away. At that point in time, I think this was the most grounded anime I'd ever watched. There's very few scenes of fantasy in the film. It was mostly just the whimsical musings of a young schoolgirl and the crush she has on this boy, and the film has this framework of a fairy tale while also just taking place in our real world with no fantasy in it, and that was something that really I found interesting at the time. In the time since then, I have seen a lot more of animes and seen a lot of grounded films, and this one, upon rewatching it now, I was surprised at how much fantasy is truly in here, but it's something that really, really works well even now. The lead character in this is absolutely fascinating. She is a young creative, and she goes on these whimsical flights of fancy and fantasy, trying to tell like little stories that are similar to the ones she likes to herself read. She's very much into reading these fantasy fairy tales, and she wishes so much to be part of that. The film smartly utilizes those same principles from those stories and infuses them in this real-world story. And so it's structured like a fairy tale without being one. And in doing so, kind of becomes one on its own. It's a really sweet and cute story. The romance that evolves is quite cute, and something that I think if you're in middle school, you're totally going to latch on to. I watched this in part with my daughter, and she was like all in on it. So it's effective even today. What really interested me is learning about the process of how this movie kind of came to be. At the time of its release, Hayao Miyazaki was kind of looking to step down from Studio Ghibli as its chief creative force, as was Takahata. They both wanted to, they were getting older in years and were wanting to kind of step back, and they each had a protege in Kondo. And so they had him be the next wave of Ghibli filmmakers. That was by design. And if you watch it with that in mind, this film very much feels like it's the passing of a torch, but one where the director is trying to honor the masters that came before. Like Only Yesterday and Grave of the Fireflies before, it is a very grounded, real-world set story, just like Isao Takahata made quite often. And just like Hayao Miyazaki's films, this has a rhythm and a flow that is much more commercial, especially to a Western audience, so much so that it has a literal country Western song that's sung throughout the film, and I'll touch on that again a little bit later, I imagine. But it has these whimsical flights of fancy, and it has, it honors Miyazaki's creative input in his own films, well, itself being its own unique thing with its own unique voice. But you have a film that's centered around a young person who is growing up in the world and wants to be a creative herself, and has a mentor that is teaching her and guiding her on how to do that. And it's not lost on me that that older man feels like a stand-in for Miyazaki and Takahata. the whole sentiment behind what this film has to offer, which is that everybody is sort of like a rock. You break that rock open and there are geodes in there. And when you break that geode open, you see the gems, you see the unrefined crystals and diamonds and gemstones, and it's your job to kind of polish that and make something of it. But first you need to get in there, chisel it away, and get to the gems inside to see if you have something truly creative to put out into the world. And that whole comparison like blew my hair back. I was all about that. That was so helpful to me as my own inspiring creative. I'm always a creative person that's liking to tell my own stories. And finding the words to put that to, this film does so better than anything I've ever seen. And I found that incredibly inspiring and helpful, and something that I was so excited to show my daughter, who herself is very interested in the arts and stuff like that, and she responded well to that too. It's an important lesson to be had. But one of the things that the film really emphasizes is how hard of work it is to really do that. The main character in this ends up quitting school and thrusting the people in her life out of her life so that she can work on her creative endeavor of writing this fantasy story. And she throws all of herself, all of her life into it, alienates herself quite literally until she gets it complete. And she hears the constructive criticism she needs and has for the whole rest of her life to refine and polish those gemstones that she discovered. This is where the film becomes kind of harder to talk about because, as mentioned before, Kondo was the person who was meant to carry on the torch for Ghibli, and this is the only film he directed because just 2 years later, while working on Princess Mononoke, is my understanding, he passed away suddenly and unexpectedly due to overwork and an overcommitment of work. And he quite literally worked himself to death for the art that he loved. And so the film takes on a weirdly bittersweet quality when you learn about that I was completely unaware of until I was reading a couple different articles after the fact. But hot damn, that recontextualizes what you see here, especially seeing the unhealthy way she goes about completing her art at such a young age. She's literally like a 12-year-old girl who is completely willing to sacrifice everything in her life for this art, which there's sort of a unique bravery to that, but at the same time, this is a child, and this is what you're kind of teaching. And when you see that and apply it to the real person who made this film, who literally died doing the same thing, it's a harder one to swallow thereafter. But the biggest sad piece of this is that we don't have any more gems from Yoshifumi Kondo because of his passing. And it's a shame, because if this film is any indication, he was going to have a career every bit as good and interesting as Takahata and Miyazaki before him. I said I'd come back to it, and I think the final ending point I want to talk about is the use of the song Country Roads, which is a lovely, lovely little song. And it's a good song that I've always liked, but what I like is how it's used here multiple times over. You have it the first time done traditionally. A Japanese artist sang it, and it's a good song, a good rendition of the song. And then you have the main girl writing it again on her own, changing up the lyrics to Concrete Roads, and it's kind of this cute yet insufferable little tweak of the song that's both cute and a little too cute, but it's supposed to be because that's going to be the thing that latches her to the guy that she will eventually fancy. And then you hear it again later when she's working at truly defining her creative self. And she rewrites the song in a way that is an expression of who she is. And it is a really excellent use of this motif of song that repeats throughout until you get to the song again at the end and they play it one last time. It's really good. I absolutely loved it, and I actually downloaded her version of the song from the middle to my playlist afterwards because it really just it works for me quite a bit. There's also a motif with a cat, and following this cat, not unlike Alice in Wonderland, following the white rabbit, pulling her into this world, which gets her to the mentor who opens up her own creative world. But what's neat about that is that will be the one film, the launch point of another film in the Studio Ghibli lineup that we'll talk about in a couple of weeks from now, which is The Cat Returns. There hasn't really been a traditional sequel. There's been little Easter eggs here and there in some of the Ghibli films that maybe tie them to one another. I'm thinking the little foxes from Nausicaa showing up in Castle in the Sky, but none of these films have a true, genuine sequel, but this film has its own spin-off, which was neat. However, that film is a full fantasy, if memory serves, and this is a relatively grounded film, so I'm curious to see, watching that, how I respond to it and how it works in tandem with this one. The very last thing I want to talk about is how beautifully animated this film is. It looks so good. The use of watercolor backgrounds that are distinct yet slightly indistinct really work for me. I really like anytime you get to the more fantasy-driven stuff, you can see the touches that are just so Miyazaki that you can see how he was honoring his mentor through that, and I really love it. But my favorite piece of animation, possibly in all of the Ghibli films whatsoever, maybe some of the Grave of the Fireflies scenes with the actual fireflies would be in contention with this, but is when she is looking at the clock and sees the dwarves mining the gemstones and stuff like that, which is literally what this film is ultimately going to be about, is finding the gems within a piece of creation. That scene and watching the clock and hearing that little whimsical story is so beautiful, and I love it. Pardon me. This is one of my favorite of the Ghibli lineup, and I urge you to check it out if you have not seen it. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, let me know what you thought of this film in the comment area down below, and next week we will be talking about Princess Mononoke, and hot damn am I excited to talk about that one. Peace.